Welcome to our program today. I am Melitona Will, your host to the Catholic Man's Journey. With me today I have on my left here Paul Rodriguez and Julian Castillo, and on my right Jason De Ocampo. Our discussions today will be on the topic of strength through weakness. And I'm going to ask Jason to read a relevant scripture passage. Jason?
Okay, our chosen reading for today is taken from the second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 12, verses 7 to 10. It says, "Because of the abundance of the revelations, therefore that I might not become too elated, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, an angel of Satan, to beat me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I begged the Lord about this, that it might leave me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. I will rather boast most gladly of my weaknesses, in order that the power of Christ may dwell with me. Therefore, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and constraints for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Jason. Now, Julian will be kind enough to read a little story.
Robert was used to having what he wanted. He had worked hard to earn his position in the community and at work. He was looked up to by others. Robert had made it. He was able to have the best and to provide the best for himself and his family. When Robert's daughter, Bristol, was born, his life changed. Robert and his wife realized something was terribly wrong with Bristol. And after much searching and testing, even the best doctors and hospitals could do nothing. For 10 years, Robert loved and cared for Bristol and prayed unceasingly for her. He cared for her every need as she slowly withered away until finally she went to be with the Lord. Nothing Robert did stopped the slow, debilitating death of his daughter. All the power, the money, and prestige in the world could not change that. Yet in his weakness, Robert was able to provide what Bristol needed most: a loving, caring father who was always there for her and who would not abandon her in her need.
Thank you, Julian. Recall a time when you relied on your own wits, power, or position to control things or events around you. Now recall a time when things were out of your control. How were you able to make it through the time when you were not in control of events or people? Anybody?
I would say that, as we grow out of childhood and maybe in childhood, are the times when we, especially myself, experience not being in control. When I was a child, I lived in a very poor family. We were not so much conscious of our poverty because every day we had 3 meals a day. Mother was a hard-working woman and saw to it that we had bread and butter and a little cheese on the table for breakfast and little rice and beans for lunch, dinner, what we used to call dinner, and the same for tea in the evening, So, but God in His goodness, through a caring mother, saw to it that the 6 of us Rodriguez children had a meal every day. So, and it didn't occur to me at that time at all that God had anything to do with it. Unfortunately, perhaps if in different circumstances we would have had a father who would urge that we say a grace before meals and thank God that He had provided for us. But we didn't, so we got along as best we could to the point where we grew up and each one of us left home and went about our business to make life on our own. So I would say, that was a time when, answering the second part of the question, when really I had no control of what happened to me. And in my case, it was especially so because at the age of 4, I sustained a terrible burn. And as a matter of fact, went to school late, a whole year. And felt that my face was terribly disfigured, my back was terribly burned, and for months I was in the hospital. And thank God I had a neighbor in the hospital who made it known to me that, look, there are still people in this world who care and who love you in spite of your disfigurement. I will never forget that man who would, when his relatives visited him, would take the ice cream that they brought for him and give it to me, I guess this is the way that God takes care of all of us. Whether you have a good father or a good mother, somehow He usually steps in. In my case, this is what happened, and I had people at school, the nuns, especially Sister Aloysius, who on every occasion that she could cheer me on, did so and got the class to cheer me on. And so I grew up feeling that, okay, all was not lost. People still loved you in spite of the disfigurement that you had suffered.
I recall a time when I had just returned from university, and I started working, and I was living on my own, and I really felt that I had things under control, finally. Had a good job, good pay, and I didn't have anybody to tell me what to do, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I felt that I had it all together and I had things under control. I would control. And so that's answering the first part of the question, Or the second part where it says, recall a time when things were out of your control. And this one really sticks out for me because, as I've shared before, 14 years ago I was diagnosed with cancer. And I really felt that it was totally out of my control. I mean, all I could do was seek medical help, but sometimes cancer can be fatal. And so it says here, how were you able to make it through that time when you were not in control? Well, to put it in a nutshell, all I could do was pray and trust God, and basically that's what I did. And thank God, and I give God the praise that I'm still around after 14 years, So that's how I would answer that question.
Cancer-free.
Right, cancer-free, amen.
There's
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say that there is a human wisdom, though, that which guides some people to undertake from very early age a career like in accounting. I mean, your profession, to have a profession. And you, Mel, in banking, you, Jason, as a businessman, you know, you work on that profession, you qualify to be good or the best in that profession, and, you know, and somehow when you do, for instance, when you established your accounting firm, Jules, I'm sure you know, you felt that, and it was very wholesome to feel, you know, now I have a handle on my life, and, you know, I have a certain amount of power to control my destiny, to control the destiny of my family. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. But, you know, sometimes if you're like a guy like me who is a rolling stone and you go from one thing to the next, it's more difficult to get to feel that you're in control. But I did, you know, especially when I got into the area of politics, where I felt that I was making an impact on the country and the way it was going and so on. So you get to feel that, you know, okay, I have power, I have a certain amount of power, people are looking up to me, but you know, if you aren't at the right place at the right time, this can be cut from under you. And this happened to me a couple of times in my other careers, other than studying for the priesthood. But every time, you know, this happened to me, I seemed to be cast into a situation where I had a family, but I could take care of my family. And last of all, when I was getting older, when I closed down my business, and I wasn't aware that, didn't even think that, you know, one of these days you would have to retire, and you would need income to keep you going, to keep your family going. And this is exactly what happened to me, and it was providential that I got into something which paid me a pension, and that's how I'm living now. That's how I'm keeping my family. So God, I am so grateful that my Heavenly Father has taken care of me, in spite of myself, you know, in spite of my wanting this and wanting that, and not having one professional goal. You know, God has taken care of me, thank God.
Actually, I have a different experience than you guys. Actually, I have never really thought that I was in control. From I was very young, I was taught about God and that He controls everything. And I used to do a lot of things that I shouldn't have done, but I used to take chances.
Mm-hmm.
I used to take chances. In other words, this is not, I'm not in control, God is in control. I knew that even when I was small, perhaps because I had a near-death experience when I was about 5 years old. I fell in the river in Benking, and I was drowning. And by the grace of God, a gentleman who I understand had made 3 attempts to go to his milpa, and somehow he forgot something and he came back. When he came back the 3rd time is when they heard the screams that I am drowning, and he lived right on the riverside. So he got into his dory and paddled to where I was, and he plucked me out as I was going down for the 3rd time, and by the hair he pulled me out, and I was saved. So perhaps from that age, I knew, you know, I had that experience that I couldn't do it all by myself, that I needed someone, the assistance of someone. So I always knew that there was somebody else, and there are many things that I shouldn't have done, but I used to take a chance and say, well, hopefully I catch the last bus, nothing will happen to me right now. So anyway, I think that we have to have a break at this moment. So we'll take a break, stay tuned, we'll be back shortly. Thank you. Welcome back to the Catholic Man's Journey. Discuss the fears you face in being out of control. How can your relationship with Jesus help you to confront those fears?
I think for me, it's not the fear of being out of control, because I know for a fact that, things, not everything will go rosy, not everything will go according to your way. You have to be prepared for those times when you're totally not in control, that things are just out of control. But I think my fear mostly is, how will I respond to that? How will I react to that being out of control? That is my fear. And how can my relationship with Jesus help me to confront these fears? I think this says everything. This is the solution right here. And there are a lot of instances in my life wherein things went out of control, and before my reaction would be to drink, to get drunk. But now it's a totally different story. I have the strength now, with the help of God, to confront these out of control situations, and you just leave it to God, leave it in His hand.
Well, I think that is a question of faith. When you have faith, you believe in God, and you believe that He's in control of everything and not really you. In other words, we are not really in control. God is in control. That's how I think, and obviously that strengthens the relationship with Jesus, because the back of your mind you have Jesus in control. I am not, and that there are consequences for any actions that one takes. However, sometimes we as human beings, we take a chance, or we do things that we know we shouldn't do, but we still do it. But I guess that's through our human fallen nature. But it's that I have never doubted that God is in control of everything, and because I have seen it from the time I was very young. We were poor when I was growing up. It was the time of the recession in the mid-30s, late 30s, and things were difficult. But I used to hear stories of my mother telling me about how God had provided for us at times when we couldn't do anything about it. I remember one time my mother tells me that we didn't have anything to eat, and she was praying, what do we do? And my father was out of a job. There weren't very many jobs going at that time. Well, we had a few chickens and a couple of pigs maybe, and fruit trees, but probably they might have been thinking of something else. And a neighbor came to the door that day and called out to my mother, and she says, "Here, I brought this for you. It is my birthday, so I did this." And she gave us things. So God provides. So He's in control.
Amen.
Jason, the devil is very clever, and especially in the case of people like you who have your own business, you handle your own money. Because you feel like you are in control. Since you're in control, you can take all the money you make today and spend it. And of course, that is precisely the thing that the devil wants you to do, to become exorbitant and uncaring and unprovidential. And you spend all the money, and if you do that every day, you will have a business which will go broke because you're not saving. So God expects us to exercise our common sense, to provide for yourself and your family as much as you can. When you reach a point where you do all the best you can, all that is humanly possible, but you still can't reach to the point where you are doing the things that you're supposed to do, then God will take over, like Mel just mentioned. He will intervene and help you. But we are supposed to take care as much as we can, because use your common sense and God will provide.
Amen. The humility and obedience of Jesus led him to become a servant, to take on human form, and to death on a cross. What does this mean to you?
What that means to me is that I have a model to imitate. Jesus gave us this example, and I need to be humble. I need to follow the example of Jesus and to serve other people, to love, and to just put my trust in Him and believe that I am the righteousness of God through Jesus. Jesus is the one who made us righteous, as St. Paul puts it. And so this gives me a model to imitate.
In other words, being God, and God is all-powerful. He has all the strength.
Everything.
And yet He became a man and allowed Himself to be scourged and beaten and crucified. That's went from one end of the spectrum to the other, to the all-powerful God, to a weakling human being.
Helpless. Yeah.
But yet through that act of humility and weakness, God raised them from the dead, and look at what He has accomplished, the salvation of the entire human race.
And you know, it's very difficult to be humble when you're perfect, right? That's exactly what Jesus did for us.
Tell me about it, man.
He was perfect. He still
Yes, and yet He was
humble and obedient.
Yeah. Actually, the catechism reading, I think 519 is very revealing here about how we should try to imitate Jesus. Because the catechism says that what Jesus wants of us and for us is for us to be other Jesuses. He wants us to take, just as He took on His humanity, He wants us to do all we can to take on the power of His divinity by imitating Him. 519 in the Catechism. I think it's a tremendous thought that each one of us, everything that is good, everything that is perfect, Jesus is. And He wants the same thing for us. He wants us to graft ourselves onto Him and be other Jesuses. Now that's
Yeah, well, we do have to graft ourselves to Him, but certainly by ourselves we can't
do it, yes.
By ourselves, we might say difficult, not difficult, I would say
impossible.
impossible.
Yeah. But that's what Jesus wants of every single one. That's a powerful thing that, man, it's humbling though, because how can I possibly aspire to be like Jesus in everything, in every way? Jesus, for instance, said, my meat is to do the will of my Father. That's what we are supposed to do. My meat, His sustenance, is to do the will of His Father. I mean, that's mind-blowing when you think of it. Yeah.
Let's take another question. How do you reconcile the model that Jesus offers with the expectations of your family, with the expectations of society?
Well, with respect to society, the society's values are totally opposed to the values of Jesus. The society promotes pride and it's a dog-eat-dog world, and you know, you try to reach the top by stepping on people, and you know, we're all familiar with that. No? In the case of our family, that gives us a good opportunity for us to serve one another, to be humble, to seek the good of the others rather than to be self-centered and to think only of ourselves, you know. So by imitating Jesus at home and at work and wherever we are, and to be prepared to put up with the consequences, you know, that's how I feel.
But I suppose that is the expectations, you know, of Christians, people who believe in God, believe in Jesus. But I guess that the world generally, you know, they operate in a different manner.
Right.
I mean, they don't make themselves weak or humble and meek and mild.
That's right.
The world does it the other way around.
But also, Mel, I think it's important, you know, for us to try to guide our kids into a proper understanding of courtship and marriage. And I think if you have a wife who has followed your leadership and who has been mostly satisfied with the life that you've been able, the material life that you've been able to provide, I think you have a blessing. I count my blessings. The first time I saw my wife, I knew in my heart that she was going to be my wife. She had the proper feminine attributes, right? But I think that nowadays we get the feeling, you know, that it's all about being sexy. You know, the woman must be sexy. And I think we need to guide our sons and tell them, look, that is important, that's very important. But what is possibly as important or more important is that you pick out a partner with whom you're going to be able to live with for the rest of your life, because she is not a person who is excessively greedy, excessively ambitious. A person will follow your leadership and will not be arrogant and say, hey, I'm a woman too, I'm a fully grown person and I do what I want. So it's very important to try to match up yourself with the person that will be a good partner, that will be satisfied with the standard of living that you can afford, and, you know, work with you to improve that standard of living, materials, but most of all, who will be a good spiritual sister, who will aid you to be a better man.
Well, for me, I'm not really worried about the expectations of society. I'm worried about the expectations of my family and the expectations of God. What are we? What are our responsibilities? You know, we are called to be light of the world. We are called to be salt of the earth. And you know, in doing that, it's extremely difficult in today's age. But what can we do? We have to follow Christ. You know, of course, we cannot do it in our own strength, but with God's help.
I think one of the things that especially younger people have to resist is there's a tendency in society that if you are like us, if you make yourself like us, we'll accept you, you'll be part of our group. That is something that I have had to resist.
I never wanted to be part of
my
it
life, you know. I gotta be myself. I want to be myself. I want to be my best self. But I will not join a group just because I want to be accepted as part of the group, you know. I have my values, and I regard my values very highly. I think I try to make them as godly as possible, as idealistic as possible. And I'm sorry, but if you don't accept me the way I am, you know, okay, I'll be your friend to the point where, you know, where it suits me, where I don't have to compromise my values, where I live according to my conscience. And that is something I think that young people have to be very careful with, you know. That's the way society is, you know, they want you to conform. the group wants to do this and you have to go along or else they reject you. I have resisted that my whole life.
I think that we have to have a break now, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back to the Catholic Man's Journey. Paul was wise and was a powerful speaker and writer. However, he saw his own pride as an obstacle. What obstacles do you face that may prevent God from fully using you? That's an interesting one.
I have a simple answer. My answer is my love of comfort and modern conveniences. That's a real obstacle for me to be able to, for God to fully use me. It's difficult to get out of that comfort zone. I like my comfort, and I like I like all the modern conveniences. So it's something that I struggle with.
I think for me it's the love of being by myself with no other people around. I like being by myself. I like being alone. That even at home, sometimes I tell my wife and my kids, give me some space right now. I need to be by myself. You know how some people get their energy from being around other people? Me, it's the opposite. I get my energy from being by myself, And I mean that, I guess that's an obstacle, right? Because in the church, we all need to interact with one another. And
you like your cave. You like to go into your cave.
Right. I like to hide under a rock. Right.
And an elderly friend, female, as we used to walk home after Mass, would tell me, Paul, I love God. It is my neighbor I cannot stand. she told me several times. I said, I hope I'm one of your neighbors that you can stand. Now, she was a good friend. She's a great lady, but she was a person who more or less depended on herself and stuck to herself and wanted to go into the cave like you, Jason.
I thought you were going to say, I love mankind, but it's the people I can't stand.
Well, actually, I think that sometimes I think, and maybe there's a little fear of what people will think of you, what people will say of you. Say, this man crazy? Look what he's doing. It's the fear of being a bit abnormal.
Not being accepted.
Well, not so much accepted, although there is part of it, but doing things that are different. In other words, normal people don't do that sort of thing. So when we decide to do something different from, we're a little bit unorthodox, then people say, what's wrong with him? What's wrong with that guy? That's crazy. For instance, if I decided, now what shall I do? I want to go and evangelize. So I'm going to go down Albert Street and, go by the park there in front of Heritage, back in front of Brody's, and start telling everybody about Jesus. Do you think you can do that? You feel a little, no, I don't want to do that. What do people think of me? I know it's that type of thing.
Mel, did I tell you about my experience when I started riding the bus to come to Radio Guadalupe? And
Guadalupe Media.
Well, at that time it was Guadalupe Radio. So I thought I'd say my rosary on the bus, right? And I said, no man, that's for look, people and think you're crazy.
Right.
I said, so But the Holy Spirit said, Paul, let me tell you something. You got a good argument against them. When you get into the bus, everybody look down, they play with their phone. I said, no, that is crazy. You are quite all right. Say a rosary. Well, anyhow, I said my rosary for a few weeks, but I realized after that it was better evangelization to have regard for who was coming into the bus and try to strike up a conversation, some kind of a relationship with people who were coming into the bus, you know. And I noticed towards the end of the time when I stopped using the bus, that one or two young people would actually get up out of their seat when I was coming and give me, when the bus was loaded, giving me their seat. No? So I said, but the saints, the old spiritual guys used to call what we're talking about human respect, you know. Many times we don't do a good deed because we don't want people to think we're strange or abnormal or we're crazy. Well, our heroes called crazy several times by a lot of people. So
I suppose that it boils down to probably pride.
Yeah.
In other words, too proud. What will people say of me? I don't want them to think so and so. I'm afraid that they will think so and so of me. So I guess it is, at the bottom of it is probably pride.
And maybe
pride.
people aren't even noticing you. You think they are, but they will notice you when you start to get up and say something. Then they will notice you.
So perhaps it's just like Paul, pride.
Pride, yeah.
I guess that what we have to do is we have to pray to the Holy Spirit and ask Him to make us bold witnesses, to give us the courage to go out there and, you know, be bold witnesses of Him.
Amen.
Yeah. Let's go on to the next question. What thorn in the flesh do you think God has given to you? Do you see this thorn as a burden or as a blessing? And why?
I think, like Paul the Apostle, I think his thorn in the flesh was his sexual appetite. And of course,
Paul?
the Apostle, I think that's what he's referring to. He was a very passionate person, you know. I had a man who would kill you if you don't agree with him and all of that stuff. But I think I was blessed. From early in my life, 18 years old, I joined the Jesuits. And as a religious person, first of all, you take a vow of chastity, poverty, chastity, and obedience. And that gives you the grace that you need to combat your appetites, especially your sexual appetites. But of course, you do in the religious life, you're trained, you're given the opportunity to meet this challenge on a physical basis every day. In the seminary, we did physical exercises. We went out and played handball in a boiling heat of St. Louis. 2-3 hours, I became pretty good at playing handball. Other guys would play football, American football. Others would play soccer every single day. So we were physically fit and we became spiritually fit, because when you exercise, and I want to encourage young people, especially, men and women, you have trouble controlling your appetites, start a vigorous exercise program. Be careful, because don't start too vigorously because you can hurt yourself. But do physical exercise, and that will help you to control your sexual appetite. And still, you know, you will have enough energy and enough, you're human enough you will have the appetite for sex when you get married, and you will have a very, very wholesome life, including a wholesome sexual appetite, because you'll be healthy.
And do they see this as a burden or as a blessing?
Well, it became a blessing for me, because first of all, it made me realize what one of the crucial appetites that I had to control, and it made me rely. It has made me, now that I've matured, it has made me realize more and more that I need to direct my affections to God rather than to a pretty face or a beautiful, sexy body. I need to dedicate all of that affection, first of all, to my wife at home, of course, and to God, and to things that are godly.
Any comment, Willis?
I struggle a little bit with this, but I came up with the fact that I have a difficulty in saying no to people when people come and ask for help. You know, I just feel this. I don't know if it's because I don't want people to think bad of me. I want people to have a good opinion of me. I'm just trying to please other people. You know, I struggle with that. So sometimes people take advantage because they know that I'm always
willing and ready,
willing to help, and I find it difficult to turn back at anybody or to say no. It does feel like a thorn in the flesh sometimes. You know, I feel like people are just being a nuisance. But it also gives me the opportunity to be a blessing to other people. And I constantly have to be watching my motivation, have to be reflecting on why am I doing this? Am I doing it for the wrong reason, or do I have a good motive? You know? So that's how I would answer that.
Well, I think that generally speaking, I think all the thorns in the flesh have their root in pride. So, you know, it may be a little, maybe sex, it may be some other appetite, but at the bottom of it all is a question of pride, I think. You know, the ego. In other words, I'm number one. And it's kind of, that's the curse that we've been left with after Adam and Eve. You know, they disobeyed God because of their pride too. The devil fooled them, and they thought that they could do their own thing without God. So it's that pride. I can do it myself. I don't need God. So, you know, I thought about this, and I thought that no matter exactly in what form it comes out, at the bottom of it, pride is the basic thing. And I think it's one of the deadly sins, isn't it?
It is, of course. Yeah. We want to be like God.
We want to be like God. Yeah. And so, you think differently, or?
Thorn in the flesh. I would say neighbors. Well, there's a lot of thorns in the flesh. Well, I share the same as Julian, because sometimes I find it a nuisance, especially when people try to take advantage. Sometimes I ask my wife, do I have a sign on my forehead that say I'm stupid? But people who push you, you give, and then they ask for more and more. But I guess a burden and a blessing, but it is a blessing because if you exercise patience, if you exercise love in that situation, then that's a blessing. It's helping you earn heaven points, right?
We don't have much time. Let's do a quick this one. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. What does this mean to you? How difficult is it to give up control and let go and let God? Quickly, Paul.
Well, I think
not long.
5 seconds. You messed me up. No, I think that even when you make a mistake, in the case of giving, mistake in the sense that the person is telling you a lie and doesn't really need. He's hustling. If you, with a good heart, give that person help, I think you're ahead. In God's book, you have made a great move.
When I realize how weak I am and how helpless I really am, then I can rely more and more on God to help me and to help me overcome my weakness.
Amen. Actually, I have the same opinion that when I am weak, I call on God, and He can do things far, far better than I can.
Amen.
So that is the advantage. When I try to do it all by myself, it's not going to be done very well. But when He does it for me, it's A1.
Amen.
You know, you and
I second the motion.
Okay. All right, well, on that note, we're going to end our program for today, and we invite you to tune in next week.